Welcome everyone once again to Give God 90, Radio on Demand. That's right, it is Radio on Demand because on Mondays I release something that goes a little more into detail than what we usually talk about on Thursdays. And that's okay. That's okay because the folks who enjoy the Monday shows are a little more in-depth, and that's great. I want to welcome you all once again for being here. Thank you so much for all the support, all the wonderful and encouraging messages that I receive. Also, I don't want to overlook this. To all the new folks out there, we really appreciate an ever-growing audience. To all the folks who've been with me for a while, you have helped create something because you have liked these shows, you've shared these shows, you've commented on these shows, and we are ever reaching out even further. I just received notice this week that we are now not only on the Apple Podcast and the Google Podcast, we are also on iHeartRadio Podcast. So don't think that you are alone out there. I know I have a lot of people who listen to these. Excuse me, I've been outside for a little while today, and the wind's kind of got my voice messed with a little bit here. But don't think you're alone, folks. You out there, and I know I get a lot of people who listen later in the week. I get people who listen when it's convenient for them, which is why I do this way. And you listen. Sometimes, you think you're by yourself. Sometimes you might think, am I the only one who thinks this way? No, you're not. I see the statistics. I see how many people visit GiveGod90.com. And by the way, I have improved some of the links on that site so it's easier to navigate. I see a lot of things that go out from where we are, and I see things that are coming back from where we are. And I'm telling you, you folks are part of something absolutely wonderful. And I appreciate each and every one of you. Don't forget, you can download the Give God 90 app because that is still going to be the easiest way. Spreaker provides a lot of distribution for people all over the world who might not have access to that. That's why we go out on places like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, all of those things. We are reaching out to as many folks as we can to help them improve their lives and the lives of the people who they are around simply by doing nothing more than making little changes every day that help them live the way their Creator designed them to live. Okay, before we continue, I do need to remind you, if you haven't ordered a copy of either Tradition to Truth, One Man's Search for Honest Answers, or God's Universe, God's Rules, if you're going to give them away this year, now would be a good time to order them. Okay, you don't want to get caught up in that last-minute rush, all that good stuff, right? Available at Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, lots of other places, wherever books are sold, really. I hate to use that sale pitch, but it's the truth. They are available. You might have to have them order them for you, but that's okay. That's okay. They will be there in time. In today's world, a lot of places have on-demand printing, and it will come right to your doorstep in your mailbox, and you get to pick it up and enjoy it, and hopefully give it away so somebody else can enjoy it as well, right? All right, today, something we're going to look at is living a biblical lifestyle, living the way your Creator designed you to live. Really, there's no room in that lifestyle for bigotry, okay? I don't know how much more plainly I can say that, but even so, there are people that I speak to, I talk with, I get messages from. They say, there's just certain people that I just don't like. There's certain actions I don't like. There's certain attitudes I don't appreciate. And that's okay if there's certain people, if there's certain actions, if there's certain attitudes you don't want to associate with. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're looking at is lumping entire groups of people, whether they're based on race, whether they're in a different religion or a different denomination, whether they live in a different country, whether they're come from a different country, whether they look different than you. Bigotry is really holding a group of people that you don't know responsible for the actions of a few individuals. Now, sometimes those few individuals can be, several 100,000, sometimes several million. But that doesn't mean that just because a few out of the entire group that has ever lived were bad or were evil, it doesn't mean all of them are. I haven't spoken to a couple of them in a few years, but I was associated and was becoming friends with a couple of Muslim gentlemen who really didn't understand Islam at all. I didn't realize that the one was Muslim until he said one day that he was. And I looked at him sort of funny and I said, but if you are, you're not a very good one. And that confused him because he didn't realize the things, he was never taught to be a good Muslim. Okay, he didn't pray. He ate things he shouldn't eat. He did other things that he shouldn't be doing. But, he was convinced he was a Muslim. Okay, at that point, I would say he's like a lot of lukewarm Christians I know. They associate with Christianity, but they don't do the things that Christians would do. I know certain Jewish folks like that I'm friends with who are in a certain sect of Judaism that sort of anything goes kind of a thing. All right? Y'all know who you are, right? So as we look at that, that's not the folks I'm talking about, okay? If you're Christian and you claim Christianity, how is it possible for you to look at a Jewish person and say, I don't like you because you are a child of Abraham? That makes absolutely zero sense, right? Same way, if a white person looks at a black person and says, I don't like you because of your skin color, it doesn't matter how you act. It doesn't matter how good you cook. It doesn't matter how good your business dealings are. It doesn't matter how honorable a person you are. I don't like you. It's kind of like a black person looking at a white person and saying, I don't like you because you're different than I am, based on the same criteria, right? Makes no sense at all. On the other hand, if maybe, let's say there's an Asian or someone from Russia who looks at someone from another country and they say, well, I don't like you because it makes no sense. We are not told not to judge people, but to be careful how we judge people. All right? That's the whole emphasis in what's being said there. We look at people as individuals. You take one-on-one individuals. Now, as a group, I have friends as everybody does, and there are certain people in that group who may do things, you really wish they hadn't have done, right? It's like, why did you choose to take that course of action in that situation? You deal with them on an individual level. Why can't we do the same when we deal with people, who are from another country, maybe a different race, maybe a different religion? If we look back in Exodus, we find out that Moses married Zipporah, who was the daughter of Jethro, a Midianite prince and priest. The land of Midian is in today what is known as Saudi Arabia. And by the way, a very short side note, the Saudi government has now opened to tourism the site of Jubal al-Lawz, the real Mount Sinai. You can book a tour and go to Jubal al-Lawz if you choose to. I know people who are doing so and really, really, really excited about it, and I'm happy for them. Wish I could go. I just can't right now. Hopefully later, maybe next year. But that's depending on a whole lot of things. Okay, but it is open. That's where the land of Midian was, current day western Saudi Arabia, not on Mount Sinai. Or the real Mount Sinai, not on the Sinai Peninsula coming out of Egypt where you know the story, right? Constantine's mother said, "Oh, this looks like a good mountain to call Mount Sinai." And that's what she did. That's how it got its name. Big tourist attraction. Okay, you can go there if you want to. Enjoy it. There's some really neat architecture there, some other things. But really, just follow the scripture, all right? That's how I'm going to say that. I grew up in a resort. I know about tourist attractions and tourist traps. You know, that's fine. They need their money too. But if you're going to put your money in and store up stores in heaven, follow the Bible. Just a clue for y'all. Okay. Moses, when he married Zipporah, is a descendant of Abraham. Zipporah, a descendant of Ishmael. Okay? Now, later on, we read in the book of Numbers where Aaron and Miriam are upset with Moses because he married a Cushite or an Ethiopian. Now, he's already been married to Zipporah, who was the daughter of Jethro. So we kind of get this concept that Moses married two people. And today we would consider that not a good thing to do, but only in the United States where we are a culture who believes in a single partner marriage, typically. Not saying whether that's right or wrong, just saying, guys, don't bite off more than you can chew, okay? Seriously here. More to it than you understand. Don't have time to go into all that. But we look at Moses and we see he married this other person, and his brother and sister are upset because he married someone different than him. Okay, they're giving him a hard time. Now, in the United States, in the very early 1900s, the entire reason we have marriage licenses today was to prevent interracial marriage, the very thing that Moses did. Now, a lot of Bible scholars will try and convince you that the reason Moses married two people was a foreshadowing of where the Gentiles would be included later on. You know, I think that's a little bit of a stretch. It's a possibility, but I think it's stretching it. I think there's better reasons for him to have done this, probably because, you know, she was, and I need to be careful how I say this, she was someone who couldn't take care of herself and needed a family situation, maybe. So Moses accepts her into the family and marries her so that she can be taken care of. That would make more sense to what Moses would do rather than be a foreshadowing down the road, right? I mean, that's just the way he was. We see it in his entire life. He was always looking out for other people. Why should that Cushite or Ethiopian woman be any different? You know, somebody else to care for. We see that in a light, though, where Moses marries someone different than himself. And that really, in that context, is inclusive in all the things in Scripture. Because what we see is something amazing in Scripture. One of the things that we should look for carefully when we're reading are these little clues that keep popping up. And one of the clues that keeps popping up is, if you remember in Exodus chapter 12, it says there is one law for the homeborn and those who join with the children of Abraham. That means the Almighty intended for everyone to live under His laws, His instructions, His rules, remember? So now we look at that and we say, well, how can we accomplish this? Well, it's very easy. We accomplish this by learning those instructions, learning what those laws and rules are, and doing them. The nation of Israel was supposed to be a growing and inclusive nation. It grew because the people themselves were having children. You know, they were They were increasing in numbers on their own. They were also supposed to live in such a way so that the people who looked around them, or who lived around them, looked at them and said, well, I don't know what it is about them, but there's something special about this group of people. I need to join them and find out how I can be as blessed as they are. That's what we're supposed to be doing today in the modern churches. We're just not doing it. We would rather, seems like, chase people away, right? How many churches do you know that willingly accept people who don't have any money to put in the offering plate? They're willing to accept people who look different than them. I have been in a lot of churches of all types, all denominations, from here and in Colorado and other places. And I look at these churches, and I've been, I think, in like 4 altogether that had what I would consider a good ratio, if you will, if I can use that word, of what society around that area looks like and what's inside that building. Let me say that again. I think I've been in 4 churches where if you walked outside and you saw how many people of different races there were, and you walked inside, it would be about the same. You saw the same mixture in the grocery store that you saw in the church. You see the same mixture of the people you saw maybe in a department store inside that church, those churches. Other places aren't like that. The majority of churches aren't like that. And that's sad, because the whole concept is to be inclusive. We accept people not based on their skin color, right? Not based on their past, but we accept people based on, are you ready for this? Their future. The Almighty is willing to look at your past and say, we don't have to talk about that. There's things you did, everybody has a past, right? There's things you did in your past you might not be proud of. The Almighty says, we don't need to talk about those things. Let's worry about your future. Churches today, and I have one that's very close to where I live, they would much rather have people get cleaned up and come to them, okay? They're not willing to take the people as they are and help them clean up. They're not willing to take the people who are maybe holding on to their history and saying, look, we don't have to worry about your history. We need to worry about your future. They're not willing to accept people and help them. They want them already righteous. That's not what we're all about. And let me say that again. The church should not be about taking people who are already righteous. We're looking for people who want to see the blessings. They look at what we have and they want part of it. They want to know how to live so that they can receive the things we have. Now, we look around and there's another group of people, and this what I'm going to talk about crosses the line of every race. It crosses the line of every religion. I don't care what the denomination or who you call God. And that is what Americans call illegitimate children. We look at what we consider illegitimate children today, and sadly, we categorize them in such a way that it dehumanizes them. It really does. And it irritates me. And I didn't know why for a long, long time. But as I read Scripture and I looked at it and I understood it a little bit more and I figured it out, we lump every child who is born out of wedlock into one category as illegitimate. Scripture doesn't do that. Scripture doesn't do that at all. Even in 1828, when Noah Webster did his dictionary, he defined the term bastard as a child born out of wedlock. That was what his determination was. And that comes from the way he understood the English word to mean. Okay? That's not what Scripture intends. When we look at the term bastard, or someone who is born out of wedlock, if that child is conceived by two people who are not married, that term doesn't apply based on the Bible. Okay? That's different. A child who is born as the event of an adulterous relationship where now two people, who may be married but not to each other, have a child, that's the result of an adulterous relationship. If one person's married, one person didn't, that's that child born to that relationship would be, considered in Hebrew mamzmir. So, that's what they're looking for. Now, what are the consequences of being born like that? Well, think about it. If you go back and you read it and you see what's going on and you understand what's happening, the only real consequence is you could not, if you were female, you could not marry a Levite priest, which means you had to be Levite to start with, right? If you were male, you couldn't be a Levite priest, which means you had to be Levite to start with. The goal, the standard, I should say, not the goal, but the standard for the Levites was higher than for the rest of the general population, because the Levites were supposed to be the example for the example to the rest of the world. As we look at that culture, God said in Exodus 19, I will make you a nation of priests. In other words, you're going to be the example to the world. The Levites were held to a higher standard because they were the example to the example. Which is why, in that society, if you happen to be a Levite born from an adulterous relationship, there were certain things you were not allowed to do. Plain and simple. Plain and simple. You just couldn't do them. Couldn't happen. And that is, the reason that is because they held those Levites to such a high standard. It's an achievable standard, but it's a higher standard. Different than what we think of in the United States today, isn't it? But that particular way of form of bigotry, holding a child, let me say this again, you're holding a child accountable for the actions of his parent or her parents. That is absolutely ludicrous. Why would you hold a child responsible unless, again, there are higher standards at play here? Today, we don't have to worry about Levite priests in general society. Okay? What we look at today, and this is terrible, we see some young person who becomes pregnant and says, well, I can't have this child, it'll be looked down upon. So she would rather murder the child than have it looked down upon. Society has done that. Society has put her in that position. Society, in their bigotry, has placed that young person in the role of, do I watch my child be chastised or do I murder my child? That's what it comes down to for a lot of people. Maybe, if we're living as we are designed to live, we should look at children as children and separate the parent from the child sometimes. I don't mean physically. I mean look at them, look at the child, and we can see them differently than we see the parent. Now, if you're careful and you look at it from the spiritual aspect, you can notice certain differences. Okay, if you do this long enough, you can notice certain differences in the child of an adulterous relationship. Think about that. There's certain characteristics that they all have. And if you're very, very careful, you can pick up on it. Not talking about physical characteristics either. So, you have to be very attentive to their actions, and you have to be very, very attentive almost to their emotions. I know a couple of people who can pick up on that much easier and much faster than I can. Now, if you think there's room for intolerance in the way we treat people, there's room for intolerance in a biblical lifestyle, but that's reserved for certain things. We do not tolerate people who are evil. We do not tolerate people who are sinful. We do not tolerate people who try to, how do I want to say this without being terribly offensive? We do not tolerate people who would proclaim there is no creator. We are intolerant of certain actions and certain things that they say. Remember, David, when he stepped out to meet Goliath, it was the things that Goliath was saying. He was blaspheming the name of the Almighty. And David couldn't stand it. We don't need to tolerate that, but we do certainly need to tolerate even those very people, and we need to treat them humanely. You don't chastise and really negate a child because of the actions of the parents. You shouldn't, hopefully, be looking at someone of a different nationality or a different color than you are and treating them poorly simply because you think that the entire country or the entire race needs to be treated that way. There's no room in a biblical lifestyle for that. Is there room for intolerance? Yes, if it's directed properly. Is there room for bigotry based on ignorance and prejudice? No, there isn't. There really isn't. Is there room in a biblical lifestyle to say, I don't like that person because they're arrogant? No, there isn't. Is there room in a biblical lifestyle to say, I don't like that person because they have black hair, or blonde hair, or blue hair, or red hair? You see where I'm going with that? Is there room in a biblical lifestyle to look at someone and say, I don't like that person because they don't dress like I dress? Is there room in a biblical lifestyle to look at someone and say, I don't like that person, I don't like that group of people because they think differently than I think? No, there isn't. It doesn't mean you have to accept what they're saying or what they're doing, but it means if they are, and I don't really want to say it like this, but I'm going to say it like this. If they are living a biblical lifestyle and the only thing you see different about them is the way they dress, the color of their hair, maybe the jewelry that they wear, you need to examine your life. You need to examine your life. Think about that. Now, if you have an entire group of people over there who want to wage war on, you because you are living a biblical lifestyle, yeah, you don't have to tolerate that, okay? You need to do something. You either need to separate yourself physically from them. You don't stay around people who are trying to harm you, okay? But you need to examine yourself and say, why? Is it because of my faith they don't like me and they're trying to kill me? Or is it because of my actions that they don't like me and they're trying to kill me? Something to think about. Because it works both ways. Intolerance works both ways. Someone that I was friends with many years ago, couldn't understand why I would go eat at his house. He says, you're the only white person that's ever come to eat at my house. And I said, well, I don't know why. Your mother makes, really, really, really good biscuits. And she did. I'm telling you, she was a good cook. I said, why didn't... He says, well, because most of my friends are white, but they won't come eat at my house because I'm black. I said, well, that's just dumb. That's just dumb. He has since passed away, and he was a really, 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 really top-notch person. And I tell you that story, not to say, oh, I've eaten at a black person's house. That's not why I'm telling you that story. I'm telling you that story because there are people out there today, in today's society, in today's world, who are so intolerant, they're incapable of getting over the stereotypes and their own prejudice and their own bigotry, their own racism, whatever you want to call it, that they will not accept a person on an individual level. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no room in a biblical lifestyle for bigotry. I hope you understand what I'm saying with this. I'm probably going to get some messages from this, and that's okay. Go ahead and you can comment in. There's a comment section on Spreaker if you wanted to do that. Please, go ahead, comment, send me the messages, whatever you want. But you understand, I hope, what I mean when I say there's certain things that we do tolerate, certain things we don't tolerate. Bigotry has no place in the lifestyle of someone who is attempting to live biblically. And I don't care whether you're Christian or whether you're Jewish. If you're living a biblical lifestyle, you should be willing to treat every person as an individual and do exactly what it says in Scripture. And that is to love your neighbor just like you love yourself as an individual. I hope this has been a blessing to you, and I hope you have maybe starting to think, am I part of the problem? Do I need to change the way I act? Do I need to change my attitude? Until next time, have a very, very blessed week.